Mr. Speaker, we think justice is only truly served when individuals on the ground can live lives free from constant fear of death and persecution from their own government and from their own state. And this isn't just stopping the murders on the ground while they are still in power. We think we have to look at the long-term solution of these kinds of problems and the long-term effects of having dictators stay in power and entrench even more their systems and their political ideologies, etc., which will only further oppress their citizens even after they're no longer in power and even after they're no longer seated. Because we think that there are long-term repercussions with letting them stay in power even further and even longer and not taking this kind of policy. Basically, you allow conflicts, for example, to continue or to only end when you have war on your hand, when there's a complete destruction of not just the economy of that country, but also the development and the ability to be able to take democracy the way closing opposition wants it to happen. Secondly, we want to limit the fractionalization happening on the ground because we do concede these ideologies and these systems entrenched by dictators are the things that allows even further the oppression after they're gone. The question is, how do you limit and take that away, considering how powerful they've been the entire time they were in power, and we think that's only going to happen if you allow them to betray their own supporters instead of martyrizing them and telling them that they've died for a good cause in the end, assuming that's what you want to happen, i.e. Saddam Hussein. Let's look into the two issues of this debate. I'll address the question of first, is the policy effective to begin with? Is it something that we can take upon ourselves so that we can fix the problem of murders happening on the ground? Second, does it still serve justice? Because this side of the House contests that the only form of justice that's acceptable is one you let people die on the ground instead of letting it stop first before figuring out what to do next. Let's look into the first idea. Is this policy effective? Because the biggest battle cry of the side of the House is this. Persecution is a good and disincentive for these dictators as it is. We cannot give it up because we want these people to stop thinking that dictatorship, sit down, is a good livelihood, apparently. One, Mr. Chair, you have to look at the psyche of these dictators. They don't go into becoming a dictator thinking, oh, I will need an opt-out policy later. I will need someone to save me. I will need, more money, for example, so that later on I can get away without getting persecuted. That's not how they think. They think that they are immune from anyone and everything. That's why they get as much power while they're still capable of doing so, sit down, while they're there. Which is why, Mr. Chair, even if you take away, or even without this policy, they'll always get into becoming a dictator, thinking that they don't even need that opt-out policy to begin with. The question now happens when they feel weak and they realize, oh, I do need an opt-out policy to stay standing. Oh, I do actually need help from the international community. Oh, I don't want to die. That's when this policy takes effect. Be reasonable with your expectations. These people don't get into dictatorship because it's fun. They get into it because they know they can do it for the rest of their life, not really thinking about the ramifications later. But then in the next idea, they will still have an entrenched system and an ideology, apparently. That's why we have to make sure that we get rid of them in an organic way, because removing them as a dictator is going to be an imposition to democracy. One, if that's the kind of analysis you have, any system where you get rid of a dictator is going to be an imposition of democracy, and they'll always have supporters thinking that. But at the second level, we think that letting them stay in power even longer, thinking, oh, we'll wait for organic change. It's gonna happen at one point or another. Let's look and wait while we see whether or not this dictator will change and be a good person after a couple of years. That's what happened in North Korea, in Somalia, in Eritrea, in Myanmar, where we just kept on waiting, thinking that organic change, for example, will happen, that these dictators will suddenly be afraid and not think of how to get out. They always, Mr. Chair, think that they have to grab onto more power to be able to solve their problem. Letting them to be a martyr along the way isn't the way to get rid of their ideology. Killing them, for example, and letting the people on the ground think, well, we died for a cause and that cause must continue is a problem. We want to make sure that these individuals step down, admit to their guilt, tell their people that they were wrong, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you kill an ideology. You let them betray their own supporters and you let them destroy that ideology on their own. Sit down. But that telling us that, Iraq is a good example of how, you won't exactly suffer from an economic plight after this kind of dictatorship. It's ridiculous because having a good GDP for Iraq wasn't a good thing. Tell an Iraqi that they have a good economy right now, they'll stone you to death. Because really that GDP only works for the elite of that nation. And that's not what we want in this kind of debate. Go.
When immunity was offered post-apartheid, the Prime Minister turned it down, and that was only apartheid and not systematic rape and pillaging and murdering. Why is now different, and why would people take it up now when they wouldn't before?
Mr. Chair, we're not saying that every single dictator will take this policy. We're talking about a reasonable expectation here. We think getting rid of one dictator is better than getting rid of none. We think that just because one dictator will say no to this policy doesn't mean that the policy is not effective and isn't as important as it is. Because we think saving the lives of 1,000 Cambodians is more important than saving no lives at all. Second issue, does this still serve justice? Because they argue that it's unfair to reward people, sit down, and in no way can we accept this kind of policy. One, Mr. Chair, this is unreasonable because you have to understand that this is an investment. We're not saying that we're suddenly going to tell people that the deaths didn't happen, that they should be happy, that there's no problem. In fact, we told them that we're going to have them admit to their guilt and even apologize for those actions, and in the end, basically admit everything that the courts would ask from them anyway. We think that these are things of value in a situation. For example, in situations where you need people to move forward, which is why this entire analysis that apologies are not enough isn't really true. Because we think that there is a value, for example, to TRCs and stuff like that. Because there is a value in being able to stop death on the spot and stop people from dying, stop people from hating each other even more, thinking that you've killed our family members, thinking that you've killed our sons or daughters, etc. And allowing a system that allows individuals to know what happened on the ground and letting them move on from that point on is something of value that you will not have from the side of the house. Because essentially they're saying that unless you let these individuals die out on their own through organic change, or you actually take them out of power through a war like Iraq, there's no other solution. And we think that's a problem. We don't want more people dying, and we don't want people even furthering their causes. Thank you.